Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a niche video for you guys where we're going to compare these two post-war Pennsylvania Road K4s. What's interesting about this is that these two K4s are both made by the same exact manufacturer and imported by the same brass importer, except the difference is one of these was made 20 years after the other one. And in that time period, a lot of things have changed as far as the exterior and the overall build of the model. And I figured that would be kind of an interesting point of topic because these brass models are handmade, so there's a lot more potential for variation, whereas a modern ready-to-run manufacturer, they could just throw the same tooling on the same manufacturing line and just pump out some more of the same exact identical engine. Because these are handmade, there's a little bit more nuance to that. And I figured that would be a cool little talking point for me. Now that I recently purchased one of these, it was kind of cool to kind of compare these two. So anyways, yeah, what we have in front of me here today is two Pennsylvania Road K4s, both with the post-war decoration and the 13,000-gallon tender with the train phone antennas. This one was made in 1960. There was over 900 of these produced, so they're actually relatively common, and they're made really, really early. So it's got that fantastic early Japan build quality, whereas this one was made in 1980. And this one, they only made 240 of these, I believe, at least according to BrassTrains.com. So they're a lot harder to find, and they go for a lot more money these days. These usually go for about $130. I paid like $110 for this one, whereas these go for usually like $400 up to like $700. And I was lucky enough to be able to buy one of these for $230-ish. That's the reason I have it today. And the reason I have two of them, for those curious, is I was always going, I had this phone for a while, and my plan was always to detail this one up to look similar to this, and then, paint it and whatnot. But now that I have this one, basically there's a lot less work that this one will need to be detailed up to the kind of standards I want to be at. So this will save me a lot of time as far as buying detail parts and replacing all of them by hand. But that being said, this is still not a perfect model. Neither one of these are, in my opinion. So that's the reason why we'll kind of get into it today and kind of talk about some detail differences and some things that both of these lack. But the main point of this video is just to kind of compare the build quality, the details, and whatnot of each of these models. So I'm going to be really nitpicky and basically talk about every single thing that I see that's slightly different. Not saying one is better than the other. Or which one's more accurate, but just telling you the differences from what I've seen. And I think it was really cool to kind of spot the differences between the two engines. I spent like a solid hour just staring at them, and it was really fun. It was like playing I Spy again as a kid. So anyways, without further ado, let's get started. We're going to begin with the tenders, and we're going to move over to the engines from back to front. That's the current plan. So yeah. Now, throughout the video, you'll notice that the later run has this really nice brass finish to it. It's a lot more even, and there's also a nice sheen to it. That's because these were coated with a thick layer of like varnish or clear gloss coat over them from the factory, so they look really, really nice. Whereas these being made earlier, they didn't come with that, so these are usually more tarnished and they look dirty even though they're not actually dirty. So anyways, if you've seen these in the video, you'll notice that this is that you can differentiate between the older run and the newer run by how clean the brass finish looks. For what it's worth, the finish doesn't actually affect your paint, and after painting either of these, they'll look identical. So the clear coat doesn't impact anything else, or nor does tarnished brass. Anyway, so starting with the tenders here. From an initial glance, they look actually fairly similar, but there are some differences. And we'll begin with these. So these are I believe the train phone antenna receivers or transmitters. I'm not really sure. Maybe the transmitters. These are kind of crude in the original run, whereas in the newer run, they've changed the tooling on it. You can see some more rivets, and it's a little bit more fine, a little bit more complexity to the shape. But that's one difference. Next up is the markers. The stock markers look pretty crude. Let me actually zoom in a little bit more. So the stock markers are pretty round. There's just like a round circle with some divots, whereas this style has some rivets and looks a little bit more fine. Looking down at the bottom of the tender, you'll see that you have this water scoop, which looks rather crude, as well as this brake cylinder and a few other components. On the new style, these three components look to be identical still. However, the water scoop and the brake cylinder seem to be a lot better in the casting quality. And And also looking up top, you'll see that over here there's these two little divots there. I don't know what they're for, so actually if someone knows, please comment down below, tell me what they're for. But on here you'll see that they look a lot nicer. So those seem to be like actual brass castings. Now the final thing, oh, also one more thing, this has speaker holes. This one doesn't. So that's a cool little difference. Although it's really not hard to drill speaker holes yourself, so it's not really a big deal. But you can tell this was made later. What's funny is that even though this has speaker holes, it's clear you're supposed to put a decoder of some sort in here. There's no way they didn't drill any holes or wires for wires to go through. So it's like they partially thought about it, but they didn't go all the way, which is interesting. Anyways, and the last thing, which is really, really unusual, is that they actually omitted something switching over to the new run. You'll see here on the original run, they have these noticeable water outlet pipes, I believe they're called. Basically, it's where the water from the tender moves to the engine. It comes out of here and then through that pipe and then out to the engine. And it's on both sides of the tender. And this is a rather noticeable piece. I mean, you could see it on 1361's tender rather visibly from the side. But for whatever reason, and I believe this is the only detail that is omitted in the new run, but you can see it's missing on the new run, which is really weird. Everything else is like the same or better, moving 20 years to the future, except for this. They removed this for some reason, and I don't really know why. So anyways, so that's that. That's a tender though. Let's move on to the engines now. All right, now moving on to the engines, we're gonna go from the back to the front. We'll see that the cab roof has no rivets on the original old style, and the new style has a whole rivet pattern on the roof, which is really cool. On the sides of the cab, there's also this, they actually shifted the rivet pattern. You can see the original one has a rivet pattern closer to the cab, whereas on the new one, they shifted that rivet line over to the left. And I believe that is more prototypical. And as far as the rivet lines on the cab roof is concerned, it seems like every manufacturer makes a different pattern. So I'm not going to comment on how accurate that is, but I can show you pictures of 1361. You can see here that there's that additional row of rivets in the front here. And you can see that a lot of Pennsylvania engines, the cab roofs would leak. And so that's the reason they would like tar over. They would put a thick layer of tar over the roof. And that's the reason why a lot of rivet details and patterns on the roofs are usually covered. And that kind of is a valid excuse for why there is no rivet patterns on the PFM earlier run. In fact, a lot of like MTH's K4 also and Bachmann's K4 both also don't have rivets in the cab roof, and I think that's perfectly justifiable because again, a lot of Pennsy K4s, although they technically did have rivets on the roof, due to the layer of tar to kind of seal the roof, they end up getting hit anyway. So I don't think this is a big deal, but it is a difference. So I did want to note that. Anyways, back to the list of things. The turret cover no longer has the triangle-shaped outline, so you can see the turret cover here. You can see it's kind of two flat pieces with an angle in the middle. So it's kind of like a triangle cross-section, whereas the new one is done much better. You can see it's one smooth, rounded piece, and I think that looks a lot better. Also, you'll notice that they corrected themselves in adding the two turret valves, globe valves, whereas the original one incorrectly only had one valve, which is interesting. We also have the swinging deck plate. So the original one has a deck plate, it just kind of sticks out, doesn't swing or anything like that. The new style does come with a swinging deck plate, and it looks really good in my opinion. So that's a nice little addition. They also have a basic backhead. You'll see the original one has a giant open frame motor, takes up most of the space inside the cab, whereas the new one, because they added a can motor, you can see in there, that allowed them to actually add a backhead to this engine. Now, it is a very basic backhead, as you can see here. There's barely anything, just like a throttle, a firebox, or like the thing, and then the throttle, brake valve. But yeah, it's a very basic backhead, but it is a backhead, and I'll take that over no backhead. And then finally, oh yeah, the plated drawbar. So the early 1960s build made this mostly brass. So you can see that, you know, the drawbar is brass, the underplate is brass. The only things that are nickel plated are the drivers and the wheels, which are the parts that are important. Whereas on this run, you can see that they actually gave this really nice, like dark chrome nickel plate finish. on like here and here and on the drawbar. And I think that's really, really cool. It's a nice little feature. Makes it look a lot nicer, although I don't think it actually makes much of a difference. I know on the drawbar it's important because it means that no tarnish can build up into the drawbar and restrict electrical conductivity. But besides that, it's just a good look, and I think it's pretty cool. So yeah. Also, by the way, I should mention that this engine here, the leading truck I already modified. That's the reason why these wheels look a lot newer. These are not stock wheels. The stock wheels looked similar to this, but the lead truck looked like this. Anyways, all right, so now move to the sides of the engine. This is the most significant section. All right, so we'll begin with the new blowdown muffler and the line. So this is a blowdown muffler right here. You can see there's a single line that comes down and there's no hole, whereas the new run has a hole in the middle and there's two lines that come down. That's I believe it's more accurate. I know certain K4s also only had one line, so this might just be like a natural variation between K4s. But like this one has two lines. The injectors, these look significantly better. These castings look way cleaner than this, which is fairly basic casting. The safety valves are also new, although the old ones actually look pretty good as well. The new ones have a little bit more of that Penzi shape, I guess you could say. The whistle's also newer. This whistle looks really nice with a little handle there. The old whistle doesn't look bad, but yeah, it's there. The bell's also new. The air pump is newer. The old casting honestly looks fine as well, but the new one is a little bit more crisp. It has a few more rivets. Notably, mine has a weird defect. You can see here, it's like missing brass there. So I need to fill in that hole someday. That's not supposed to be there. Yeah, this has a little defect there. And also there's actually this valve here. It's missing that little handle that goes into the cab. It should have it. But my model is just because I don't know, it's just maybe a manufacturer defect, but it should have that handle on this side, but it's missing. But ignore that, please. All right, what else is different? So the bell, air pump, the boiler steps and running boards. So these steps on the old model are just plain, and the running board has a tread pattern like this. The new style has tread on the steps, and the running board is a different pattern, which I thought was interesting. The sand dome exit. So yeah, here we go. So here's a sand dome. On this model, you can see here, it's a really basic, like, flat piece. On this one, they added a few little, I guess, pipe connections, I guess you could call them. The old one didn't come with brake shoes. That's actually a really easy way to tell between old PFM engines and new ones, is that the newer ones all have brake shoes. So these are plastic, but they painted them gold for whatever reason, just like the leading truck wheels. I don't know why they did that. This should be black, but they painted them gold just to look nice, I guess. The trailing truck's a little bit different as well. The plate it rests on is a little bit more crude on the old one. And this back plate here is just a piece of sheet brass. Whereas on the new one, this is a much nicer casting in my opinion. And this back plate actually has a little bit of detail. And then, oh yeah, and the last thing is this steam line here. I believe this is the line, it feeds the injector's steam. This is lagged, you can see here. The original one is just a piece of brass wire. Not a huge difference, but I do like that a little bit of additional attention to detail. Moving on to the other side. The air filter or air strainer here is a little bit different. The newer one has a little bit more, I guess, depth in it than the original. The train control box, the original one, this is broken on this one here. You can see it's missing that plate, but it looked really crude. It was basically just a piece of flat metal, whereas this is a proper train control casting. That was something I was going to replace on this one. Yeah, this looks way better in my opinion. The throttle line, that's this here. This doesn't exist on the old ones. So that's cool. That's a nice little touch. And the air tank drain cocks. Oh yeah, so these things here. So every single one of these air tanks has a little drain cock. There's one there, and there's one there. And on the old style, that doesn't exist. That's just missing. And finally, the domes. So these domes here have a little tip, little nub on them. All these do, whereas this old style didn't have any of that. I don't know if that's 100% prototypical or not. Looking at other models, it seems like it should have them, but yeah. Oh, one thing I forgot to add was this one also has the boiler like straps or boiler band like clips, whereas the old one doesn't have. That's a nice little touch. I like that. Finally, we'll take a look at the front. I want to mention between that this engine is significantly heavier. The older style engine seems to have a much larger boiler weight than the new style. Not really sure why that's the case, but this will definitely pull a lot better than this one. So if you're considering it, the older one will probably pull better, although it's probably not hard to add weight inside this new style either. So looking at the front, the old style has an older style smoke box. You can see that there's no rivets in the bottom here, and it kind of just like blends into the smoke box, whereas the new style has a more defined, there's rivets, and it's more defined, you know, it's being a separate piece. The top of the cylinders here also have a little bit more detail. Old style looks like that. The brake hoses, of course, the brake lines are proper pieces, whereas the old one was just like a coil, looked like a spring. And lastly is the generator feed. So there's this line here that's on a lot of Pennsylvania engines that it's a line that feeds steam into the generator to power it up. You can see it's missing on this model, although all the other details exist on this model, which is really cool, including the generator exhaust, as you can see there, and many other details. All in all, I think the PFM K4s front area looks fantastic, and I'm really happy with how they look. Oh, and then one last thing I almost forgot is the pilot. The pilot itself is newer, and I think it's a pretty big improvement. The stock, the old style pilot was very flat. You can see it almost looks like a flat piece of metal, when really it should be more angled. It should be more like a triangle. So on the new style, I think they replicated it fairly well here. You can see it's much more, it's got more of a flare, I guess you could say, instead of the original one, which was way flatter. So anyways, I think the front pilot looks a lot better on the new one. That's definitely one of the bigger upgrades in my opinion. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for differences between these two models. As I mentioned, besides the details, the build quality is the same. They're both fantastic. This one has more weight. It's got an open frame motor. This has got a cam motor. It's got less weight. And yeah, as far as details that are like removed, as I said, it was mainly just the water line here. Everything else, I think, are just only additions. I don't think they removed anything else. So anyways, yeah, so let's move on to the final section. Taking a quick look under the shell, you can see that the two mechanisms, this one's much newer. The old style obviously uses the old open frame motor, a little bit of tubing, nicely fitted with some brass couplings there. And then the old classic, reliable but somewhat noisy PFM United gearbox. And also notice that the leading truck is part of the main screw that holds the boiler to the chassis. This new style comes with a really nice Sagami motor. I've never seen anything like this before. What looks like a really nice gearbox with an idler gear, so it raises it up so you can mount the motor flat, which is always a nice touch. And then the leading truck is actually mounted not to that main screw, but rather to a mount here, and then it's sprung, so it aims to always center the leading truck. Really nice touch. It's the subtle things like that, the subtle improvements like that that really like show thought and care in designing one of these models like that. So anyways, and then looking at the boilers here, you can see that the old boiler, this entire section here is filled to the brim with a giant chunky lead weight, whereas this new model, as expected, look at that tiny little weight. Not only does it not extend past here, but also it doesn't even fill up the whole boiler. Like half that boiler looks to be empty. So yeah, this is a lot lighter, although in practice this is still heavier than most like ready to run engines, so like this is still really solid. But there's definitely room in there to add more weight, so if you want to, you can always do that. But anyways, I want to actually show a clip of these two running, so I'm going to put these back together and we'll put them on the track. Alright, I'll begin with the 1960 run, see how she runs. This one's pretty rough shape, just the oil's old and I gotta clean it up a little bit, but yeah, so it runs, it's smooth and it's powerful, but yeah, it's not very quiet. Alright, now for the 1980 run. Runs much smoother and much quieter. This is also before any lubrication. This is just stock. It's been sitting in the box for many, many years. But yeah, it definitely runs much better. The new motor and new gearbox definitely helps. All right, for the final section, I wanted to bring in my BLI K4 here. In my personal opinion, the BLI K4 is probably the best looking affordable K4 you can buy on the market right now. I think it's better than both of these PFM models, and honestly, it's probably just the best K4 all-around model you can get. So anyways, we'll be comparing with this a little bit, but I just wanted to talk about a few things that neither version got right. In other words, they got it wrong in the 1960 run, and they didn't bother correcting it in the 1980 run. Most of these are going to be concerning the tender, and I know that the BLI tender is a little bit different, so you'll have to trust me here. But if you look at both of these style tenders, you'll see that the layout's fairly similar, and unfortunately, it's just not right. So this toolbox, for one, just doesn't exist. If you look at pictures of, and most of the K4s I've seen, I haven't seen a single one with this little tiny toolbox on the engineer side, both on the 11,000 gallon and the 13,000 gallon tenders. That just doesn't exist. So I'm gonna remove that. This air cylinder here should be mounted on the center beam. It should not be mounted on the fireman's side. So I don't know why they did that. And again, that's true on both of these. The train phone antenna area is quite barren. It's lacking a lot of the actual like wirings and stuff that connect these two together, and etc. So I want to add some of that stuff. The front has the brake lines and stuff, but the rear doesn't have anything. They never bothered adding that for some reason. So I want to add some of that. The water lines, as I said, I still want to add those back in. I don't know why they got rid of it, but I want to add it back into the new version. And let's see, the train phone box. So the train phone antenna not only meant the train phone antenna, like all these pieces need to be added, but also the the backup light has to be shifted from the center to off center. And the thing that they forgot, which was adding the train phone antenna box here. There would be a little like box that's embedded into the side of the engine here that you would normally see. But it's missing on this model, on both versions. So it's kind of disappointing that they didn't bother fixing it 20 years later, but that's all missing. So that's pretty much it for the tender, though. From the engine, so as I said, this is the first run, and this leading truck I replaced. I actually replaced with I think a GEM E6 leading truck, because the original one, the wheels are spaced far too far apart. It looks similar to this. Now, this, as you can see, this leading truck is a lot more detailed than the original PFM style truck. It's got like some bracing and suspension detail. However, it still has the same issue with the wheels being too far apart. So I fixed it with this one by replacing it with a GEM truck that looks nearly identical, but just a little bit shorter. And I also replaced the wheels with Bachmann wheels, I believe. But unfortunately, they didn't bother fixing it, and they kept the overly wide leading truck. And that really makes the engine look really strange. The wheels should not be this far apart. If you look at a BLI model, the wheels are much closer together, and that's what it should look like. So unfortunately, they didn't bother fixing that. As I said, I already modified this one. Realistically, I'll probably put this truck on this engine and just kind of move on with that. But it's kind of disappointing they didn't bother fixing that. This new model is still missing the cylinder cocks that you see on the bottom here. It's still missing. And finally, the main thing, or the last thing, is these sniffer valves. So these sniffer valves really should protrude all the way out to like the front of the cylinder here. You can see that well in the BLI model here. You can see the sniffer valve protrudes out a lot. And also, if you look at pictures of the prototype 1361, you can see the sniffer valve like protrudes out basically all the way. But for whatever reason, on the PFM model, the original one looked okay. It was kind of inset, like it doesn't stick out far enough, but it still looks okay. But for whatever reason on the new run, they basically made it inset even more. So it's almost like it's like stuck inside of the steam delivery pipes. So that's a really weird look. I'm gonna have to redo that entirely because that just looks really weird. But yeah, so that's some of the things I still need to work on with this model here. As I said, my plan probably is to just sell this one off because moving forward with this model is significantly, saves me a lot of time because I don't need to upgrade as many detail parts. But that being said, this model is still not perfect, as I said, and the things I just mentioned are things I still want, that I'll have to add myself. So anyways, yeah, this is still not a perfect model. Again, I think the BLI model honestly is just better in most ways. So, but I really like the look of the PFM's K4s, especially with the longer style tender. So that's the reason I'm going to keep this one. And I'm going to just put a few hours into this and improve some of the details. But anyways, hopefully that was an interesting video. It's kind of rambly. It's kind of very, targeted toward a very specific, listener, for someone who's interested in buying a brass K4. Those are just some like thoughts I randomly have. And I think it was kind of cool to kind of compare the evolution of these two models from 20 years apart. Anyways, hopefully that was interesting to somebody out there. And yeah, if you have any questions or comments, please comment down below. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.